Earth's last hope. The cold emptiness of space stretched endlessly before Admiral Sarah Chin, her eyes fixed on the holographic display showing Earth's battered surface below. The planet, once a thriving hub of life, was now a mere shell of its former self, scarred by war, ravaged by the brutal onslaught of an alien race. It had been 3 long years since the Zerov Empire's invasion had begun, and humanity had been pushed to the brink of extinction. Cities had crumbled to ash, vast landscapes were scorched, and the skies above Earth had been darkened by the ships of an unstoppable alien force. Sarah stood tall on the command deck of the Phoenix, Earth's last hope, her hands clasped behind her back as she gazed at the devastation unfolding on the screens. Every display, every sensor readout, was a testament to the desperation of the situation. The fighting was fierce, but humanity was outmatched. The Zerov Empire's technology was far superior to anything humanity had ever developed, and their numbers were overwhelming. The survival of the human race depended on a single ship, a ship that had only been partially tested and was still a mystery, even to those who built it. The Phoenix was a creation of sheer willpower, born from the ashes of Earth's darkest hour. Hidden beneath the surface of Mars, the ship was the result of years of reverse engineering alien technology and combining it with humanity's greatest minds and ingenuity. It was unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. A sleek, obsidian-colored vessel with no visible weapons, no conventional engines, and a power source that defied the laws of physics. It was humanity's secret weapon, a symbol of defiance, a beacon of hope that they could still win, even against such overwhelming odds. Admiral Chin's thoughts were interrupted by a voice behind her. "Admiral, the Zerov fleet has breached the Kuiper Belt," Lieutenant Oliver Ross reported, his voice tight with tension. "They'll be in range within 6 hours." Sarah's heart sank. 6 hours. That was all they had left. Earth had endured 3 years of devastation, but now the end seemed imminent. She turned to face Ross, her expression hardened by the weight of the moment. "Understood, Lieutenant. Begin the countdown for Operation Phoenix." A hushed silence fell over the bridge as the crew processed the significance of her words. Operation Phoenix was humanity's final gamble, their last chance to survive. The ship they had built, the Phoenix, was ready to fight, but no one truly knew what it could do in the heat of battle. The technology they had fused together was a wild mix of human creativity and alien science, a potent combination that could either save them or destroy them all. Deep beneath the surface of Mars, in a secret military facility, the massive generators hummed to life. Energy readings spiked to unprecedented levels as the crew inside worked frantically to bring the Phoenix online. In a cavernous hangar, bathed in an eerie blue light, the ship rested, its smooth surface gleaming like obsidian in the darkened room. It was the culmination of decades of research and desperation. This was it, humanity's last stand. Inside the control room, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, the lead scientist behind the Phoenix, stood with her arms crossed, her eyes scanning the data as it flooded the screens before her. The hum of the generators filled the room, a constant reminder of the power they had tapped into. She had overseen every aspect of the Phoenix's development, from the alien technology to the human modifications, and yet there were still moments when she felt overwhelmed by the sheer potential of the ship. The Phoenix was more than just a weapon. It was a statement, a declaration of humanity's refusal to bow to the Zerov Empire. "Dr. Rodriguez," a voice crackled through the comms. It was General Marcus Caldwell, leader of the human forces on Mars. "The Zerov fleet is approaching. Are you ready to activate the Phoenix?" Rodriguez took a deep breath. This was it. They were no longer operating in the realm of theoretical possibilities. The Phoenix had to work. "Yes, General," she replied, her voice steady. "Activating the pilot interface now." In the heart of the Phoenix, Captain Jack Harper prepared for the most important mission of his life. The ship's systems were linked directly to his neural interface, a connection that would allow him to control the vessel with his thoughts. It was an unprecedented technology, one that had never been tested on such a scale. But there was no time for doubts. The survival of humanity rested on his shoulders. As his consciousness merged with the ship's systems, Captain Harper felt an overwhelming sensation, as though his mind had expanded to fill every inch of the massive vessel. It was like nothing he had ever experienced. His thoughts flowed through the circuits, through the energy conduits, and into the very core of the ship. The ship was not just a machine. It was an extension of him. He could feel every sensor, every weapon system, and every engine working in harmony. He was no longer just the captain of a ship. He was the Phoenix itself. Phoenix to control. Harper's voice echoed through the ship's communication systems, the tone of his words carrying an almost otherworldly resonance. He had always known that this moment would come, but the reality of it was something far greater than anything he had imagined. The Phoenix was alive, and it was ready for battle. As the countdown continued, the crew aboard the Phoenix braced for what was to come. The Zarov fleet, with its vast numbers and superior firepower, was about to make its final push to annihilate humanity. But what the Zarov didn't know was that humanity's greatest strength wasn't in numbers. It was in its resilience, its creativity, and its unbreakable will to survive. The Phoenix would lead the charge. It would not only fight for survival, it would fight for the future of humanity. And as the ship surged forward, cutting through the vastness of space, a new chapter in the war for Earth was about to unfold. This was only the beginning. The Phoenix ascends. As the Phoenix tore through space, leaving the surface of Mars behind, Captain Jack Harper's mind pulsed in unison with the ship's systems. He could feel the hum of the engines, the whisper of the hull against the void. The massive warship, once an idea born out of desperation, was now a powerful force capable of shifting the course of the war. Its sleek obsidian surface shimmered against the backdrop of stars, cutting through the emptiness with an almost eerie grace. Inside the control chamber, Harper's thoughts raced. The interface was more complex than anything he had ever experienced. He had trained for this moment, undergone countless simulations, but nothing could have prepared him for the reality of it. The ship was alive in a way that no one had anticipated. It wasn't just the integration of human technology with alien engineering. It was something more. The Phoenix was a reflection of humanity's strength, its ingenuity, and its unyielding will to survive. Captain, Lieutenant Julia Carter's voice crackled through his comlink. The Zarov fleet has accelerated. They're on an intercept course, and they're coming in fast. Harper's heart tightened. There was no turning back now. He could see the massive fleet on the radar, their ships blotting out the stars as they advanced. The Zarov ships were monstrous, towering behemoths that dwarfed anything humanity had ever built. Their designs were sleek and cold, their weaponry advanced beyond the human imagination. The sheer size of their fleet was enough to make even the most seasoned military officers hesitate, but not Harper. He had fought in countless battles before, had faced impossible odds in the past, and yet, this time was different. This was the last stand, not just for him, but for all of humanity. He couldn't afford to be afraid. "Prepare to engage," Harper ordered, his voice calm but filled with a quiet determination. His fingers hovered over the ship's control panel as his mind connected with the vessel. The Phoenix responded to his will. Its powerful engines roared to life, and its weapons systems powered up with an almost sentient precision. The crew aboard the Phoenix worked in unison, each member attuned to their task as if they, too, were part of the ship itself. Lieutenant Carter, stationed at the tactical station, scanned the incoming Zarov fleet with laser focus. "They're deploying their interceptors," she reported. "They're trying to box us in." Harper's eyes narrowed as he analyzed the enemy's strategy. The Zarov were not just powerful, they were cunning. Their tactics were calculated, their coordination flawless. But they hadn't anticipated humanity's creativity, nor the fire of determination that burned within every human heart. The Phoenix wasn't just a weapon. It was a symbol of everything humans had fought for: and everything they were willing to sacrifice. "We'll break through," Harper muttered under his breath. He wasn't speaking just to himself, but to the Phoenix, to every crew member aboard. The ship seemed to respond to his resolve. It had already absorbed the most advanced technology the Zerov had to offer. Now it was time to show them what human ingenuity could do. As the enemy fleet closed in, Harper initiated the first maneuver, a daring zigzag pattern designed to evade the incoming interceptors. The Phoenix responded instantly, its sleek hull shifting and turning in ways that no conventional ship could match. The alien ships struggled to adjust, their weapons locking onto empty space as the Phoenix danced around their attacks. Each move was a calculated risk, but it was working. Harper could feel the ship's systems syncing with his thoughts, amplifying his every command. Locking onto the enemy flagship, Carter's voice came through, filled with the adrenaline of the moment. Firing. A blinding flash of light erupted as the Phoenix unleashed its first salvo. The energy bolts ripped through the darkness, striking the enemy flagship with pinpoint accuracy. The explosion was catastrophic, sending shockwaves through space. The Zerov flagship, a massive warship the size of a city, buckled under the force of the blast, its shields flickering and failing as the ship's systems overloaded. The crew erupted in cheers, but Harper knew better than to celebrate prematurely. The Phoenix had made its first strike, but the battle was far from over. The Zerov would retaliate, and they would come at them with everything they had. Harper's fingers danced over the control panel as he issued new commands. The Phoenix shifted its course, turning sharply to avoid a barrage of enemy fire from the surrounding fleet. The alien ships were relentless, their weapons far more advanced than anything humanity had encountered. But the Phoenix wasn't just a ship. It was an extension of humanity's willpower, and its resilience was unmatched. Deploying countermeasures, Carter announced, launching a cloud of high-tech flares that confused the Zerov targeting systems. As the Phoenix banked left, it launched another devastating strike, this time aimed at the enemy's forward command ship. The blast tore through the vessel's shield, sending debris scattering across the battlefield. The Zerov fleet was beginning to falter. They had expected a quick victory, an easy conquest, but what they didn't understand was the sheer unpredictability of humanity. The Phoenix was more than just a warship. It was a symbol of human strength, a testament to the ingenuity and creativity that had brought mankind to the stars. And now it was fighting back. "Admiral," Carter's voice was urgent, "the enemy reinforcements are arriving. We got more ships coming in from the outer edges of the system." Harper's mind raced. The battle was escalating, and the stakes were rising with every passing second. But he couldn't back down now. "We fight with everything we have," he said, his voice unwavering. "The Phoenix will lead humanity's charge." As the Phoenix engaged the Zerov fleet in full force, Captain Harper's resolve never wavered. He knew that the fate of Earth hung in the balance. This was more than just a battle. It was a fight for survival, a fight for the future of humanity. And as the Phoenix continued to tear through the darkness, its weapons blazing, Harper knew that no matter the odds, they would never surrender. This was humanity's final stand, and they would not go quietly into the night. The tide turns. The Phoenix shot through space, its sleek form cutting through the vacuum with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Inside, Captain Jack Harper's senses were completely attuned to the ship's every movement, every shift in momentum. His mind flowed seamlessly with the ship's systems, guiding its every maneuver as the crew raced to hold off the oncoming onslaught of the Zerov fleet. The battle had escalated into a maelstrom of destruction, a deadly dance of ships and weapons in the cold, indifferent expanse of space. The Phoenix had delivered devastating blows to the Zerov flagship, but the enemy's retaliatory forces were closing in fast. The battlefield was alive with the deafening hum of energy blasts, the sharp sound of weapons locking onto targets, and the flashes of light that filled the dark expanse like fireworks in a starless sky. Harper knew that this was only the beginning. The Phoenix had held its ground so far, But the enemy was relentless, and they would not stop until humanity was wiped from existence. The Admiral's voice echoed in his mind as the pulse of the ship's engines thrummed through his consciousness. Do not let humanity fall. And he wouldn't. Not now. Not when everything was on the line. Captain, Lieutenant Julia Carter's voice broke through his focused thoughts. The Zarov are regrouping. Their flanking ships are on the move. They are trying to box us in. Harper's grip tightened on the control panel as he absorbed the situation. The Zarov had an impressive strategic mind. They were beginning to work together, moving in tight formations to trap the Phoenix and crush it under their superior firepower. But Harper wasn't just going to roll over. He wasn't just going to watch humanity's last hope crumble. The Phoenix was the product of everything humanity had, every scrap of ingenuity and creativity they had ever devised. The ship was built to survive, to fight when it seemed all was lost, and that's exactly what it would do. Initiate evasive pattern Sigma 9, Harper ordered. The crew reacted instantly, working in unison to carry out the captain's command. The Phoenix veered sharply, banking to the right and spinning in a complex series of maneuvers that sent it darting through the chaos of enemy ships. The Zarov had anticipated a direct confrontation, but the Phoenix was built for unpredictability. It danced through their attacks, weaving between firestorms of deadly energy, the crew's hands steady as they guided the ship through the violent storm. The ship's weapons came to life again, firing in rapid succession. Each shot was calculated, each energy blast aimed with surgical precision. One of the smaller Zarov vessels, attempting to flank the Phoenix, was caught off guard by a barrage of high-energy missiles that tore through its shields, exploding it into a fiery cloud of debris. The crew cheered in muted triumph, but there was no time to celebrate. The battle raged on. "Target the lead ship," Harper commanded, his voice unwavering. The Phoenix responded, its massive cannons locking onto the largest Zarov vessel in the formation, a hulking warship that seemed to tower above the rest. The energy shields flickered as the ship's weapons unleashed a blistering storm of fire. The Phoenix had no intention of holding back. The blast struck true, tearing through the Zarov ship's outer hull, sending a cascade of sparks and debris into the cold emptiness of space. It wasn't enough to win the war, but it was enough to send a message. The humans weren't backing down. The Zarov had underestimated them, assuming that their vast numbers and overwhelming technology would crush any resistance, but they hadn't counted on the resilience of humanity. The sheer, unyielding will to survive that drove every person aboard the Phoenix. "We've got more enemy ships coming in from the rear," Carter warned, her voice tense. "They're not giving up." Harper's mind raced as he assessed the situation. They were surrounded, outnumbered, and running low on ammunition. The Phoenix had taken heavy damage in the fight, the hull scarred from enemy fire, its energy reserves depleting rapidly. The crew worked tirelessly to keep the ship operational, but even they knew that they couldn't hold out forever. The Zarov were vast, their ships seemingly endless, and the Phoenix was one ship against an entire fleet. In that moment, Harper knew what he had to do. He had a plan, a desperate plan, one that could either win them the war or doom them all. It was a risk, but humanity had always survived on risks. If the Phoenix could push through the enemy fleet, make a direct assault on their command center, it could turn the tide. The Phoenix had the firepower, the technology, and most importantly, the heart to make it happen. But it would take everything they had. "Lieutenant Carter," Harper began, his voice calm despite the chaos around them. "Prepare to make the jump. We're going straight for their flagship." The bridge fell silent for a moment as the crew absorbed the gravity of his words. The flagship was heavily guarded, surrounded by layers of defense and powerful weapons. It would take every ounce of the Phoenix's strength to even reach it. But it was the only option left. "Are you sure, Captain?" Carter asked, her voice barely above a whisper. It's suicide." Harper's gaze locked with hers, and for a moment, he saw the doubt in her eyes. But then, just as quickly, It was replaced by the same determination that had burned in him since the first battle began. They couldn't stop now, not when humanity's future hung in the balance. "We fight for survival," Harper said firmly. "We fight for Earth. We fight for our future." The crew nodded, their faces grim but resolute. They knew what was at stake. It wasn't just a battle for territory. It was a battle for the very survival of the human race. They would not let the Zerov take their world without a fight. And if they fell, they would fall together, united in a cause greater than any one individual. With the plan set in motion, the Phoenix surged forward, cutting through the chaos of the battlefield with renewed purpose. The crew worked in perfect synchronization, their movements seamless as they fought back against the overwhelming tide of the Zerov forces. Each shot fired, each strategic maneuver, was a message. Humanity would never surrender. As the Phoenix broke through the enemy lines, heading straight for the Zerov flagship, the battle reached its climax. The future of humanity rested in their hands, and they were prepared to do whatever it took to secure it. The tide was turning, but the war was far from over. A shattered horizon. The Phoenix pressed forward, its engines roaring as it broke through the remaining layers of Zerov ships, a singular force against a sea of invaders. Captain Jack Harper's focus was absolute, his thoughts no longer his own but intertwined with the ship's systems. Every movement was part of a larger dance, a balance between instinct and technology, the ship and its pilot moving as one. The Phoenix was no longer just a machine. It was an extension of humanity's spirit, and Harper could feel that spirit pushing him forward. "Captain, we're approaching the Zerov flagship." Lieutenant Julia Carter's voice rang out through the comms. "They're putting up heavy resistance. Their defensive shield is absorbing all of our fire." Harper didn't flinch. He knew that the Phoenix had the firepower, but the Zerov flagship was unlike any ship they had encountered before. Towering and monstrous, it was the heart of the fleet, brimming with weapons capable of wiping entire fleets from existence. But the Phoenix wasn't here to retreat. It wasn't here to wait. It was here to make a statement. It was here to win. "Activate the phase dagger," Harper commanded. The crew didn't need further explanation. They knew the maneuver. The phase dagger was an experimental feature of the Phoenix, a weapon designed to bypass conventional shields and strike at the very heart of the enemy ship. The technology was still untested on such a scale, but now there was no room for caution. They had one shot. The ship's systems hummed as the phase dagger was deployed. It was a harrowing moment, as the Phoenix veered toward the flagship at breakneck speed. The weapon, an energy beam powered by a combination of alien tech and human ingenuity, was unlike any other in the galaxy. It could penetrate the enemy's advanced shielding and target the most critical systems within the ship. But it required perfect precision, and the slightest miscalculation could spell disaster. "Targeting their central core," Carter reported, her fingers flying over the controls. "Charging phase dagger, 3 seconds to release." The Phoenix sped toward the flagship, cutting through the enemy defenses like a knife through butter. Energy blasts whizzed by, narrowly missing the ship's hull as Harper guided them through a series of complex evasive maneuvers. He could feel the tension building in every member of the crew, their lives hanging in the balance of a single strike. He had always been a fighter, trained in every aspect of military strategy and warfare. But this felt different. This wasn't just about the war. This was about survival. "Phase dagger at full charge." Carter's voice broke through the quiet of the tense bridge. "Ready to fire." Harper took a deep breath. Fire. A beam of searing light shot out from the bow of the Phoenix, its power shaking the very air within the ship. The energy beam pierced the darkness of space like a comet, striking the heart of the Zerov flagship. For a moment, there was a flash of blinding light as the beam collided with the enemy's central core. The flagship's shields shattered, crumpling like paper beneath the unrelenting force of the strike. The blast sent shockwaves through space, a silent scream that resonated in the emptiness. "Direct hit," Carter said, her voice filled with disbelief. "We've breached their core." The Zorov flagship shook violently, its internal systems failing as sparks erupted from the breach. The alien ship, once a symbol of their vast technological superiority, was now a dying behemoth, its energy output spiraling out of control. But even as the Phoenix had landed a devastating blow, Harper knew this victory wouldn't be without a cost. The enemy's response would come swiftly and brutally. "Captain," Carter's voice grew frantic. "The rest of the fleet is closing in. We're not done yet." Harper gritted his teeth. They had given everything for this moment, but it hadn't been enough to bring the war to an end. The Zerov Empire wasn't going to surrender. They were relentless. But humanity, too, was relentless. The Phoenix had proven that they could stand against an empire far stronger than them. But the battle was far from over. "All hands, brace for impact," Harper ordered, his voice firm as he steered the Phoenix into a sharp turn. The remaining enemy ships had regrouped, surrounding them on all sides in an effort to trap the Phoenix and destroy it once and for all. The Phoenix's shields flickered under the pressure of incoming fire, the ship groaning as it absorbed the impacts. "We can't keep this up forever," Lieutenant Carter said, her voice strained with the effort of managing the ship's systems under fire. "The ship's energy reserves are nearly depleted. We need to find a way to disable their fleet, or we're done for." Harper's mind raced. They needed a plan, and they needed it fast. They couldn't take on the entire fleet head-on, but there was one option left, a high-risk maneuver that, if it worked, could decimate the remaining enemy forces. It was an idea that had been discussed in the planning stages of the Phoenix's design, but no one had ever believed it would come to this. "Prepare the Nova charge," Harper ordered. His crew exchanged nervous glances. The Nova charge was a last-ditch weapon designed to unleash a massive burst of energy that would obliterate everything in its radius, friend and foe alike. It was a weapon of desperation, a weapon that could ensure their survival or their annihilation. "It's a one-way trip," Carter said, her voice tight with fear. "Once we fire it, we won't have the energy to escape." Harper didn't hesitate. "It's humanity's only chance. Make it happen." As the crew scrambled to set the weapon into motion, Harper glanced at the viewscreen, where the Zorov fleet loomed large. The aliens had underestimated the resilience of humanity, and now they were about to learn the full extent of that mistake. The Phoenix powered its systems to the limit, channeling every last drop of energy into the Nova charge. Outside, the enemy ships were closing in, their weapons primed to destroy the Phoenix once and for all. The countdown began. 10 seconds to detonation, Carter announced, her voice shaking with tension. Harper braced himself. There was no turning back now. This was the final gamble, the last card in humanity's deck. If they succeeded, they would cripple the Zorov fleet, ensuring their victory. If they failed, they would burn together, consumed by the fury of their own creation. 5 seconds, Carter called out. Harper stared ahead, a quiet resolve settling over him. This was what it meant to fight for survival. This was the spirit of humanity. Fire. The Phoenix erupted in a blinding wave of energy, a cataclysmic burst that rippled through space, engulfing everything in its path. The alien fleet was caught in the shockwave, their ships disintegrating in an instant. The explosion was so massive, it illuminated the distant stars, casting a bright glow across the battlefield. For a moment, everything was silent. Then, the remnants of the Phoenix drifted in the void of space, its systems flickering on life support as the crew waited for the inevitable. But humanity had survived. The price of victory. The stars stretched out before them like a blanket of cold fire as the Phoenix drifted, silent and battered, through the vast emptiness of space. The aftermath of the Nova charge was evident everywhere. The battlefield was now a graveyard of shattered ships and twisted metal, the remnants of the Zorov fleet scattered across the void like the broken pieces of a shattered dream. Inside the bridge, the crew of the Phoenix was silent, each of them processing the enormity of what had just transpired. The ship, once a symbol of humanity's defiance, now lay on the edge of collapse. The strain of the battle had pushed it to its limits, and the energy reserves that had fueled its incredible weaponry were all but drained. The damage to its systems was extensive, and it was clear that the Phoenix wouldn't survive much longer without immediate repairs. "Captain, we've lost primary power to the shields," Lieutenant Julia Carter said, her voice tinged with exhaustion. "Engines are at 15% efficiency. We're coasting now, unable to maneuver." Harper stood at the helm, his mind a blur of calculations and decisions, but his gaze was steady. He knew that they had won the battle, at least the first one, but they had paid an unimaginable price for it. The Phoenix was their only ship, their final weapon, and it was barely holding together. The chances of escaping the battlefield before any remaining Zora forces could regroup and pursue them were slim. "How long do we have, Carter?" Harper asked quietly, his eyes scanning the fading power levels on the screens. "We're running on emergency reserves," she replied, adjusting her headset. "Maybe 5 hours before we lose all remaining systems. If we don't get help soon, we're stranded." A cold silence settled over the bridge, broken only by the faint hum of dying engines. The crew had just witnessed the destruction of an entire fleet, an incredible feat that would be talked about for centuries to come. But the victory had been costly. Harper's eyes moved over the tired faces of his crew, each of them worn thin by the months of relentless war and the brutality of this final battle. They had all given everything. They had given up their lives for this mission, and now they were barely holding on to hope. "Admiral," Lieutenant Ross said, his voice breaking the stillness, "we've detected a small signal coming from the outer rim of the system. It's faint, but it's human." His voice trembled with a mixture of hope and disbelief. "It's a distress call." Harper straightened. There had been no other human fleets in the area, no reinforcements. If there were other survivors, if there were ships out there, they would have arrived long before this. A cold thought crossed his mind. Was it a trap? Was it the Zarov, pretending to be human to draw them into a second ambush? But the desperate, flickering signal was unmistakable. It was human. "We have to investigate," Harper said, the words coming out before he could think them through. They were on the brink of death. Their ship was falling apart. But if there was even the slightest chance that humanity could rebuild, they had to take it. "Helm, plot a course for the signal. Best speed." Carter looked up sharply. "Captain, we can't risk it. If that signal is a trap, we're walking into a death trap with no way to fight back. We're sitting ducks out here." Harper's jaw clenched as he weighed the risks. She was right. Everything told him to retreat, to preserve what was left of the Phoenix and wait out the Zarov. But he had seen the devastation of Earth. He had seen the survivors hiding underground, the last of humanity clinging to life. This was their chance. This could be the moment that humanity could begin again. "We take the risk," Harper said, his voice resolute. "Plot the course. We'll take every precaution, but we have to know what's out there. Humanity can't survive if we don't take chances." With a reluctant nod, Carter moved to the controls, and the Phoenix lurched forward, slowly coasting toward the weak distress signal. The ship groaned in protest, the engines barely responding, but it moved. They moved. As the hours dragged on, the bridge crew worked in tense silence. They monitored the ship's systems, checking every sensor, every power conduit, hoping the ship would hold together long enough for them to reach the source of the signal. The silence between them was thick, each person lost in their thoughts, wondering what would come next. The signal led them deep into the outskirts of the system, toward a cluster of dead planets and asteroid fields. There, in the shadows of a gas giant, a faint outline appeared on the sensors, a ship, small and unremarkable, drifting aimlessly. It was damaged, its signals weak, but it was unmistakably human. "That's it," Ross whispered, a note of disbelief in his voice. "That's human, Captain." Harper felt a surge of hope, tempered by fear. They were close, but the ship could still be a trap. The Zarov could have left it there as a decoy. Or perhaps it was a survivor ship, one of the last remnants of humanity, its crew too broken to function. As the Phoenix closed the distance, they could make out the shape of the ship through the viewport. A freighter, battered but unmistakably human in design. Its hull was torn in places, smoke still rising from several ruptured sections. It was clear that whoever had been aboard this ship had fought just as hard, just as long as they had. "This is it," Harper said, his voice low. "We're going in." The Phoenix drifted into the proximity of the damaged vessel, its systems barely holding together. Harper could see the faded insignia on the freighter's side, an old Earth symbol, the last mark of humanity's unity before the war. The distress signal had led them here. But as they began preparations to board, a chilling thought crossed his mind. What if this ship had already been abandoned? What if the survivors had died, and there was nothing left but the wreckage? He couldn't afford to think like that. Not now. They were so close. This was their chance. "Prepare the boarding teams," Harper ordered, standing tall as the weight of the moment settled over him. "We'll search the ship, see what we can salvage. If there are survivors, we bring them home." The crew sprang into action, ready to face whatever awaited them. As they prepped for the mission ahead, Harper's mind swirled with a new fear. Humanity's survival was a fragile thing, like a delicate thread that could snap at any moment. But they had to keep going. They had to keep fighting. They had to rebuild. As the boarding party prepared to disembark, Harper glanced at the damaged freighter, his resolve solidifying. This was their only chance to restart. Even with everything lost, even with the odds stacked against them, they would continue. For humanity, for Earth. And as the Phoenix docked with the freighter, the door slowly opened, and they entered the unknown. The next chapter of humanity's survival was about to begin. The survivors. The Phoenix shuddered as it docked with the damaged freighter, its systems protesting the added strain. The doors of the cargo bay opened with a low hiss, revealing a scene that was eerily quiet. The once proud freighter, a testament to humanity's resourcefulness and ingenuity, now lay in tatters. Broken hull panels jutted out from the ship's side like jagged teeth, and the faint scent of smoke and burnt metal lingered in the stale air. Captain Jack Harper led the boarding party, his pulse steady, his mind focused. As he stepped onto the freighter's grated floor, his boots clanging against the metal, he surveyed their surroundings. The dim emergency lights flickered intermittently, casting long shadows across the empty hallways. It was a stark contrast to the vibrant life they had once known. The bustling cities of Earth, the thriving space stations, the endless promise of the stars. Now, all of it felt like a distant dream. Humanity had been reduced to this, a handful of survivors scattered across the galaxy, hiding from the overwhelming force of the Zarov Empire. "Stay alert." Harper's voice was low, but firm as he spoke to the team behind him. "We don't know who or what we'll find here. The Zarov might have left a trap, or there could be survivors in need of immediate help." The silence of the freighter was unnerving. The air was thick with the smell of burnt electronics and something else, something foul, almost metallic. As they moved deeper into the vessel, Harper couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched, that the ship's dark corners were hiding secrets just out of sight. The emergency lights cast an unsettling glow, creating an atmosphere of tense anticipation. The freighter's corridors were cluttered with debris, broken equipment, overturned crates, and personal items scattered across the floor, the remnants of lives once lived. Harper's heart ached for the people who had once called this ship home. He could only imagine the horrors they had endured. The Phoenix's crew had fought hard to survive, but the people who had once worked on this freighter had likely faced a much different struggle, one of isolation, fear, and loss. "Captain, look at this," Lieutenant Julia Carter called out from the next room. She was crouched by a damaged console, her fingers moving over the controls in a practiced motion. A flicker of life came from the console, and soon a faint image appeared on the screen. It was a video feed, showing a small group of people. They were huddled together, wearing ragged uniforms and looking terrified. A woman in the front appeared to be the leader, her face streaked with dirt and exhaustion. Harper moved closer, his heart pounding. The video was grainy, but the desperation in their eyes was unmistakable. They were survivors, just like him, just like his crew. "Can you amplify the audio?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Carter nodded, tapping a few buttons. The audio crackled to life, faint at first, but then clear enough to make out the woman's voice. "We've run out of food," she was saying, her voice hoarse. "The Zerov ships left us here to die, stranded in deep space. If anyone hears this, please, for the love of Earth, come find us. We have nowhere left to go." Where? The video feed cut off abruptly, the screen flickering before going dark. For a moment, there was only the sound of Harper's breath, steady but heavy in the silence of the freighter. The weight of what they had just heard settled on him like a physical force. These were the last survivors of another ship, the last remnants of humanity. And they were depending on him, on the Phoenix. "Lieutenant Ross," Harper said, his voice sharp with determination, "prepare a search team. We need to find these people, now." Ross gave a quick nod, his face grim as he gathered the team together. "Understood, Captain. We'll locate them." Harper turned his attention to the rest of the freighter. "Let's move quickly. We need to get them back to the Phoenix before we attract any attention from the Zerov. The last thing we need is to be caught off guard while we're rescuing survivors." The team split off, searching different sections of the freighter. As they moved deeper into the ship, Harper couldn't help but wonder how long these survivors had been stranded here, how many had given their lives in the struggle to stay alive. It was a sobering thought. Finally, after what felt like hours, one of the crew members called out from the rear of the ship. "Captain, over here." Harper and Carter rushed toward the sound, their footsteps echoing through the halls. They reached a small cargo hold, where a group of ragged survivors huddled together, looking up at them with wide eyes. The woman from the video feed stood at the front, her face gaunt and drawn, her eyes filled with a mixture of relief and disbelief. You came," she said, her voice trembling. "We never thought anyone would come. We thought we were the last ones left." Harper stepped forward, offering his hand. "We're here to help. We're part of the Phoenix, and we're taking you back to our ship. You're not alone anymore." The woman reached out and took his hand, a faint spark of hope igniting in her eyes. "I'm Captain Eliza Foster," she said, her voice hoarse. "These are the last of my crew. We've been hiding here, hoping for a miracle. I thought Earth was lost. I thought humanity was gone." "We're still here," Harper replied, his voice steady. "We're still fighting." For a moment, the weight of their words hung in the air, the full gravity of their situation settling over them all. But then, something shifted. Captain Foster's face hardened, her resolve growing stronger with every passing second. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a leader, and she was ready to take action. "We're not giving up," she said, her voice firm. "If you're still fighting, then so are we. We'll help you rebuild. Together, we can still make a stand." Harper nodded. The Phoenix may have been battered, but it wasn't done yet, and neither was humanity. The survivors aboard this freighter, battered and broken as they were living proof of that. They weren't just survivors, they were a new beginning, a future for humanity. The crew of the Phoenix had fought for their lives, and now they had found something worth fighting for again. Together, they would rebuild. Together, they would rise from the ashes. And in that moment, as they began preparing to return to the Phoenix with the survivors in tow, the future of humanity felt just a little bit brighter. It was a small hope, but it was a hope nonetheless. "Let's get them home," Harper said quietly, his heart lightening with the weight of this new responsibility. "We have a lot of work ahead of us, but this is where it starts." As the survivors of the freighter joined the crew of the Phoenix, Harper felt the stirring of something deep within him, a flicker of hope, a spark that had been nearly extinguished in the darkness of war. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun.